Online accessibility. Do you have it in place? Hi, I'm Monika Hutnik, and I help leaders learn how to lead their international and virtual teams. Together with my team at ETA Leadership and Culture, we make the change happen by means of training, coaching, or facilitation. This podcast, A Step Ahead, has been created for all who want to grow in such an international remote environment, who want to grow as leaders, as HR, as change agents, and simply as humans. I'm inviting you here for discoveries and insights. All recording and materials are available at www.astepahead.pro. We talk a lot about managing diversity, about diversity of people, and about the beautiful performance which is made possible thanks to diversity in organizations. But have we made sure before that this diversity actually can work in practice? Can all the kinds of people access the resources of our company? That's the question. Today, I'm talking to Mike Koeppe about online accessibility for people with visual impairments, and I think this is going to be a very interesting topic. Mike, if you can introduce yourself to our listeners and also tell about what you do as a business, it would be very good.
Hi, thanks for having me, Monika. Basically, I have a very private story behind, and so is a story of iAble, the company that I'm representing. My personal story is that my sister has a learning disability, and during the time when I had to do military service, I chose the civil service in Germany, and I had the opportunity to work with people that had different sorts of disabilities in a workshop environment. And this workshop environment really was an eye-opener for myself that if you enable people, give them the right means and tools to perform better, enhance whatever skills they have, they will be much better also in terms of their personal value perception, but also they will be a very productive part of our society as well. Because what I have seen, particularly in that workshop, and my sister is now also working in such a workshop, it is a very interesting from the aspect of what they can do, what they can learn. Does it take more time? Yes. But with a little bit of patience and giving them the right means, and they will be able to do this. And they're very, very grateful about that they can do something that has a meaning, that they also get taught about what they're doing for what is it good for. And therefore, I can only say from that, based on that experience, I can extrapolate it to anyone else in our society with more or less a stronger or not so strong disability, or that if we give them the right tools and means, they can excel beyond what they could do without it. And that makes them a very valuable, integrated part of our society. Probably the best example is always the wheelchair ramp, right, which is quite visually strong. If someone in a wheelchair stands in front of a staircase, that's a barrier. But if you give this person a ramp, they can easily access the next level. And literally that's with all disabilities, right? If you give them the tools and means in a very meaningful way, then it helps them actually to get to the next level, what they can achieve. And it's amazing to see that they can do it, but they need some support from us. So that's the quite important element. That's my personal story and my personal experience. iAble itself is a company that comes or was based on a situation that happened to the founders at university when they have been students. One of their fellow students, Marvin, he had to quit university because he couldn't access the e-learning system that was provided by university. In general, a good thing to have. E-learning systems, you have all the materials online, you can revisit and so on and so forth. It's very much enriching the study experience, which I didn't have 20 years ago because the internet and all the systems haven't been developed in that way. But on our path to digitalizing our world, communicating more, exchanging more information, which are the key elements of digitalization, right? Speeding up processes. We did not notice that there are people who cannot interact with digital displays as a big group or as a majority of our society can. And this was the case with Marvin. He couldn't actually see all the things that have been literally displayed to him because of his visual impairment. He had to quit university, which of course is a pity because he was a guy who had all the abilities, but he couldn't access the material that he needed to study. These couple of friends around Marvin, they thought that's a little bit unfair, right? There must be some way how to deal with that. And so they dig deeper into the matter. They did their research and they found out there are some standards which are governing these kind of situations, which are called the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines, in short, WCAG. They also noticed there's nothing that is, no tool available, let's put it that way, that is basically applying these standards, right? Out of that situation, they said, we have to do something. And so they created iAble as a startup in order to overcome the situation and make it easier for people with visual impairments to access our digital world, which is a blessing. But for these people, it is a barrier that they, to a big extent, cannot overcome.
And I imagine this is one of those situations where we, meaning the majority, don't lose anything, but on the contrary, some other people can make a big difference with this.
We talked about Marvin, right? And a lot of people might think about, oh yeah, that's one person. And I'm exaggerating now here. But if you look at the population, right, Poland has about 36.7 million people, right? If you only look at Poland. But in general, no matter where you are, it's about 10 to 15% of each population across all these nations and groups in our society. There are people who have visual impairments. And these 10 to 15% face barriers that sometimes might be minor and sometimes might be quite big barriers. So 10 to 15%, just also to put a number behind it, if you still look at Poland, right, with 5 million inhabitants, we're talking about 3.7 to 5.5 million people which have that issue.
That's a lot, isn't it?
It's a big number, right? And sometimes, and I always say, we don't see what they don't see. This is a situation that needs to be put more into the spotlight, and it will be, because in 2025, all major companies, big companies, also institutions and so on and so forth, need to have these WCAG standards applied on their web pages. That also means that they have not only the obligation, but also business benefits coming out of that.
So this number is actually striking. Whenever we think, 10% or 15%, this number is a kind of abstract. But now when you imagine it's about 2 million or even 3 million people or even more, just in Poland, that's a plenty of people. And I can imagine they can be in all kinds of roles. They might be your employees, but they can also be your colleagues. They might be your customers. And I imagine it's a huge impact on society. So that's something really worth addressing. And if we can look a little bit at the area of visual impairments, I am short-sighted. So I know this little part of being short-sighted or long-sighted. What are the visual impairments actually? What is this?
You're spot on. It could be your colleague, could be a customer, could be just friends, right, which struggle with this. This kind of barriers could come from different disabilities or a combination of these. You have people with have visual impairments. Just as you said, wearing glasses, I wear contact lenses, right? But without it, we know we would have trouble sometimes to navigate around. It would be quite fuzzy. And so we also know from that experience, we built up a coping mechanism to navigate in this world. But this is just basically a helping tool. In our case, it would be glasses, it would be contact lenses. But there are people with, for example, dyslexic people, right? They're hypersensible when it comes to light, when it comes to information. Old people also benefit from these new standards. Epileptic people have an issue with this as well, because they need to be razor sharply focused on content and not on all the advertising and the additional information all around. Chronically stressed people are also falling into this category, right?
Wow.
Yeah. It sounds maybe not so intuitive if you think about it, but if I'm stressed and I don't find the information that I want to find, we know usually you're getting a little bit more stressed, right?
Yes, that's true.
Which
ends with a little disease or a heart attack, yes, in the end.
Yes.
That's not what we want to have or create.
It's this typical meme from the internet where this office guy demolishes his computer, right? Because he doesn't get the information from the computer that he needs. There are also people with cognitive issues that kind of benefit from it as well, because what the WCHG guideline basically is doing, simplifying the navigation around any web page, makes it all more visible, what is maybe hidden due to some nice and fancy design, which is no problem for the majority of us people. But sometimes we talk about simple things like links to the internet being integrated design-wise in any other content that you can't even really see it or they disappear. I guess one of the best examples that I bring along in this case is imagine you are colorblind, and 10% of men are colorblind, and this is because of some genetic issues. That's why it's 10% men. Women like you, lucky you, hopefully you don't have that issue, but there are less women who suffer from colorblindness. Yeah, we all have to carry that little burden. But why not breaking these burdens down and make it easier for all of us? Because you have seen the variation of different disabilities that can be served with an improvement of the digital accessibility of web content. So back to the example, right? Color blindness. Imagine a person who is colorblind for red. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Red is
this
used
person doesn't see the color of red. Mm-hmm.
Yes, usually turns into some gray tone. So that's what is usually happening, because the colors goes away. You might see a little bit of contrast, and that's where you get gray tones of some sort. Depending, of course, also on the intensity of the red. Right, it's a very light red, then it will be very light gray. If it's a darker red, it will be a darker gray. But nevertheless, in combination with things, it can be very tricky for someone to actually find the checkout button on an eShop. If you think about that as a company who wants to sell more digitally via their eShops, you simply don't make it possible for that person to make that purchase. If that person even gets there, right? And not even started to give up beforehand. So that's business that will never happen to you. So in this respect, it's quite important that you actually integrate your design in a way that it makes more visible for a majority of people. And that is said, of course, there's no one-fits-all solution, right? And when we look at this, you need to have basically two components. One is, of course, to make your web pages fit according to the WCHD guidelines. So you have to go into the back end of your systems, of your eShops or whatever, and basically rework some of your design and some of the colors schemes that you use. So things becoming more visible. This can be done with an easy tool. iAble created that tool, which is basically an audit tool that points you to the error. And from the error, it tells you what to do and where to do it. So pretty simple. I call it's a monkey task. If someone would tell me how to do it, I could do it as well. And I'm not an IT person, so. But monkey task back and forth, it is essential that this is be done because this is the basis for it. The other tool which is required is a plug-in assistant, or an assistant that is integrated on the page. And that's quite important. But it's integrated and it helps with individual needs. And these individual needs can be then set in a menu of different functions and that you can change from different color schemes, text sizes, not only text or letter sizes, but also gaps in between letters or gaps in between lines to make it easier to absorb and not so packed and busy for someone who has epileptic issues, right? Because it's an overload that comes through their eyes. So this assistant is a plug-in tool which you need to plug in into your web page. So it doesn't work if you only put it into your browser. Because if you want to keep the integration of your web page or your eShop, you need to do the changes basically on your eShop or web page. Now,
in the source, so to say. Mm-hmm.
Exactly. Because you cannot do anything else than putting a layer on top when you use it on a browser and do some basic things, but not everything, right? So this tool can, for example, help to hide information which is not core of this particular page, which might be information that guides you to other pages for more information. But with some people have issues with their attention, right? Like stressed people. This could be all hidden. So you get only the core information, but it doesn't destroy the page on the back end, right? It's just changing the view that you personally need as the particular user who has made the settings according to your personal needs. So you have on one hand the base layer on the that is across everyone for every need basically catering, and then you have the individual tool on top, where you can do your individual settings.
I can see a lot of ways to apply this, not only in online shops, which obviously depend the most from clear and very usable web pages, but even in our training practice. Just last week, I was running a training on managing diversity, by the way, but coincidentally, it turned out that it was a group of elderly people. I think they were 60 plus. And among others, I was showing them some web resources. I was just, showing them with a beamer. And I realized that some of them are really having difficulties in seeing what is there because maybe some of the font was too small, maybe it was not clear enough. So just precisely what we were talking about. It was not clear enough. It was not readable enough. It was not easy enough to obtain the information. Another example from our daily practice, basically, is that we try to avoid printing materials for the trainings by inviting people to work basing on online materials. So, for example, I show a QR code, people scan this QR code with their mobile, and then on their mobile, they can open an article, a task, or whatever. And now, if this website, which I'm, linking to, is not clear enough, then these people will never be able to, to work on this exercise because the effort of going through all this unclear, somehow stuffy content is too much in comparison to the value that the activity itself can bring. So that's some of the most simple ways. And, when we think about online shops, my connotations usually go to a desktop version, but it doesn't have to be. It's even much smaller on just a mobile screen, which makes it even more difficult to navigate sometimes. So what successes have you had as a company in making it more readable? Do you have any success stories that you want to share?
Just to say, the tool is also available for mobile applications. So
that's what I imagine, absolutely.
Yeah, so you can also use it there. And you touch a very important point, which I would like to reflect on, is elderly people. right? And they're becoming more and more in our more maturing society. And they exactly have these issues. And you can see it clearly when you look at their telephones. They usually have the biggest font size set that is possible.
Yes, that's true.
Unlike younger people, that's always an indicator. And they find it more easy to navigate through something where they can read it rather than trying to find out what's written there. So that's definitely also an additional target audience. However, it's not only about e-shops. Right. It is also about governmental structures and information systems. You know, these good examples of the Baltic countries where you can basically register a company within one day because it all works online. But it needs to be accessible, right, and for everyone, and not only exclusive for those who have no visual impairments. And visual impairments, and maybe that's also a misconception in our world, is not only about the extreme case where people can hardly see anything, or people who are certified as a disabled person in their country, which usually is about 50% disability level, right? So in terms of visual impairment, that would be have left 50% of their visual strength. But people who have 49, 48, 47, right, have basically the same issue, maybe not to that extreme, but this is the gross group of people with visual impairments. Talking about a success story, definitely iAble itself is a very inclusive company. 33% of all the employees have a disability in the area mostly of visual impairment. And they are not only there for the sake
That's
of
reliable.
Making a social statement, but they're even testing the app and all the functions and all the changes that are coming in. Yes, so it is not just a technical tool that was developed by some technical guys who read the guidelines and then they developed it. No, it's really at the heart of the actual reason why the company was founded, but also at the heart of their employees, because they want to work for all the other people who have issues with that, and they do all the best that they can do in order to develop and test it right on spot, and not depending on any kind of feedback from the real world. So that's the premises. And there's one of their colleagues, and she has only 5% visual strength left. If you think about it, 5%, 95%, she cannot see anymore. And she received a workspace that was equipped with all the tools as much as possible, including a Braille keyboard or writing and so on and so forth. And the most striking sentence she said once in an interview was, "I'm happy that I can work again."
That's really empowering. That's a striking message.
Isn't it? Right? Well, everyone on Monday mornings, and we're recording it now on a Monday, right? We're saying, "Oh, it's Monday again. I have to work again," right? She loves to go to the office because she knows that she can deliver value. Value, of course, in this case, that is also helping others who are suffering from the same issue like her. Maybe not in this extreme, but she can help these people, and that even makes it more valuable for her. But this whole sentence, "I'm so happy that I can work again," personally drives tears in my eyes, because I can really relate with that person, and that she's really happy that she can be integrated. And then we look at one of the group of people who could benefit from such an integration tool. We talk about an untapped potential of adults who could work but cannot work because there are no tools on hand that would help them to integrate into the work environment. Exactly. That's this. It's basically their wheelchair ramp that they're missing. I don't know how this is in Poland, but I know a couple of countries are facing a very low employment rate and a lack of people in the workforce. I know here in Czech Republic, where I live, we have a workforce of about 50% of the total population, which is about 5 million. And The unemployment rate is around 2% or something like this, which is basically people switching jobs back and forth, as we know from statistics. But the gap is 300,000. The question, though, is if you look at the 1.3 million people with visual impairments in Czech Republic, can they all maybe replace or be placed in these vacancies? Maybe, maybe not. I don't know in particular. But there's a good chance that you can help these people, or some of them, to find a job. And for a company to find quickly someone who can jump into the job, because the other option is migration.
Yes, that's true. That's true. I think in terms of the job market situation, Poland is getting more and more similar to Germany and Czech Republic in terms that the job market is very saturated and the unemployment rate, luckily, it's low. Yes, we like to think it this way as potential employees. But from the perspective of an employer, this is an issue. So I think we are all experiencing the same challenges. Last year, we got many people coming from Ukraine to Poland, and many of them have stayed. Actually, the hope was that they would be able to fill in this gap in the job market. But the reality showed that the match between the skills which are needed and the skills which are available is matching only partially, if I may say so. So absolutely many people have been employed, but it has not really satisfied the need for people. And I completely agree with you that addressing people with special needs, for example, people with visual impairments, can really help solve this issue at least partially. Yes, and I think it's user-friendly for all of us. Yes, inevitably, for example, all of us will become older. And with the time, as the time flows, we will be making the font in our mobiles bigger and bigger. And in a few years' time, we will really appreciate the increased online accessibility also for ourselves. So it's also a kind of, building our own future, securing the employability of us own in the future. I like to think it this way. I mean, we are sitting in the same boat, in a way. So I really like what you said about addressing the issue, let's say, by design. Yes, let's create something that's good and that addresses the needs of people with different needs just from the very beginning.
Of course, migration is not a wish list, right? In a way, you have to take what comes. But when it comes to people with visual impairment, you definitely cross two bridges already. It's language and culture, which is always an issue when you have to integrate someone even with the right skills. And this is just a natural thing. So there's no evaluation behind it. But it also impacts the social structure in a society. And also let's put it this way, the budget of the state. Because people who work can earn their own money. So they're not just getting a job where they feel valued for who they are and what they can contribute, but they can also earn their own money. And that's, for most of them, it's more worse than getting any welfare from the state. The higher the integration potential is for these people, the better it is also for the state, because the state can, it sounds strange to say save that money, but can put that money in other initiatives where people probably need more help and not so easily be integrated, right? Because also budgets are getting tight when it comes to social welfare in a country. Therefore, it has also a big social impact from a society perspective. Of course, it's also the exposure to people with different backgrounds, different abilities, and so on. I don't want to use disability in this respect, but different abilities, because some people becoming also much better with their senses, with other senses, when one of their senses is limited. But this said, it will create more understanding. It will create more based on the exposure that these people will receive in society. And especially when it comes to visual impairments and these cognitive issues and stress-related issues, we don't really see it on the outside of a person. right? You see when someone's sitting in a wheelchair, you see it when someone needs crutches and so on. It's very apparent. But with people who have visual impairments, you don't see that because, as I said before, right, they found a coping mechanism to go around when they see traffic lights. They know when the light on the button is showing up, you can go. You know the top one means stop, even though they don't recognize the colors or only one of the colors, right? So they can still have a driving license because of that coping mechanism. But in most cases, especially in the digital world, you don't see that anymore, right? And that's what I said at the beginning, right? You don't see what they don't see. And that's where we need to put a lot of attention and awareness to it. But on the other hand, 10 to 15% of our population are affected by it across the board. Doesn't matter which social group you're in and whatnot. I'm sure everyone has someone in their circle of friends or family who has an issue with that.
Yes, I'm precisely thinking about a friend of mine. I think it was maybe 10 or 15 years ago when he started having some issues with his eyesight. I don't even need to explain, but the fact is that he started his career as a very successful engineer, but because of his eyesight issues, he had to change the job. And it seemed that, finding a relevant job in a corporate environment, in a manufacturing environment was simply out of scope for him at that time. Yes, I need to highlight that it was more than 10. I think it was 15 years ago. What he is doing now, he is a successful photographer. So that's the surprise. He still works with visual art. Yes, he's still, grasping the moment and taking great photos. He has been having photo exhibitions in a bunch of countries. So this is a confirmation that if only his eyesight issue had been addressed properly, he could have stayed a valuable employee inside the companies. Well, surely he remains as a valuable person. Absolutely. But I think maybe this unexpected redirection of his career was also a reaction to the inability of finding a relevant job, simply saying. So I'm very glad to see that now it is becoming a kind of an official guideline to address needs of people with special needs. All right. We have been talking a lot about our experiences and about many of the, observations and stories that are parts of our life. But I'm also wondering whether you would have any numbers that we can look at, any numbers that you could share on this issue.
Certainly. Stories are always good to create a picture for someone who is not affected by it, right? And it's easier than just throwing some numbers on people. But of course, numbers are important too in order to get also some dimensions to it. And when you look at the inclusion of employees, then the statistics, and these are numbers from Accenture, so it's not just some random research on the street. 56% increase their job performance. 56% of people who have visual impairment. So they're really becoming more integrated and more valuable for an organization. There's also 50% reduction in fluctuation rate. So people becoming more loyal to the organization. Of course, they are grateful that you create them a space where they can excel beyond what they could do without all the help, right? You help them. Obviously, you help them too. It's a normal habit. And of course, what is also important, and then there's a money factor, 75% reduction in sick days. Yeah, this is an enormous number, and it costs a lot of money to an organization, right? Of course, we're always talking about what to invest into it and what to get back from it, right? The return of investment, despite that by 2025, it will be mandatory for most of the companies. But I like to talk about the benefits first before I'm talking about the mandatory part of that, because this is just a deadline in the end, because if you honestly want to do something, you will do it. But you should also earn the fruits of your well-doing. So 75 reduction in sick days is also based on the fact that people have less problems and they don't have to focus so extremely close on what they see and what they don't see, right? So, and we know that this kind of stress that evolves in such situations can have an impact on your physical health, not just on your mental health. So a lot of these people benefit from this by being also less sick. So you help them even become a healthier person. On the other hand, if you look at the talent gap, we already touched it, right? You can expand the talent pool because you're more inclusive. All of a sudden, you have 10 to 15% more of the working population, age-wise, that you can talk to, which is an enormous big number, right? Especially in days when unemployment rates are small or low, which is good in many ways. But then our gaps are opening up for jobs which don't get filled, right? Through diversity also comes innovation, right? Because you're also inviting a lot of people who have a different view on the world. In this case, very literally, different view on this world. And they will help you to become more visible as a company. And of course, it's also an ESG topic, right? Your image as a company, as a caring employer is definitely something that helps your brand image. And if I may expand to it, it is 50% of employees would consider resigning if the company values don't align with their company values. So the company values are important for employees, at least for 50% of them. Now, one may say, okay, but this is a nice thing to say. Where's the action? And 1/3 already said they have quit their job in a company where these values didn't align, their personal values didn't align with the company values. So there is action behind words, and especially the younger generations, Gen Z and so on, they're actually asking for these kind of work support from their employers.
This is precisely what I wanted to say when it comes to the sensibility to the company values, but even more to the inclusivity, inclusive workplace. I think the youngest generation is the most attentive to this, the most sensitive to this. So it's a very important topic to address. Thank you so much. I think, Mike, you've given a lot of stories, but you've also given a lot of information. Now, maybe in the last stage, you could also give us some guidelines. So what might be some next steps that the listeners of this podcast could potentially take?
Basically, don't wait until 2025 arrives. It seems like a long time, but you have to do a lot of changes in the back end. Your IT department is probably very busy already with other things because there are more and more requirements coming towards IT departments from various sources of your organization because you're digitalizing your business. You maybe have to expand on your e-shop business and so on and so forth. Also internally process optimization and so on and so forth. So your team is already very busy. And waiting until the last moment at the end of 2024 would be not very helpful, and they would hate you for that. So at least what you can do now is to flag the issue so it gets on their list, right? It will come by 2025. And it's also very clear that if you don't comply with these standards, there will be some hefty fines coming along. And these fines are going to impact actually your margins heavily because these fines are based on your turnover. And if I have the numbers right, it was about up to 5% of your turnover. So if you think about it, yeah, that's very painful, especially when you look into maybe a profit margin of 10%, which is already very good, right? That means 50% of a profit margin is gone, which you cannot use for investing into any other projects, right? The cost for changes are not that big in comparison. Of course, it always depends a little bit on the business case and the organization. You need to put some manpower into it or hire some external guns from an agency who can help you with these improvements. iAble definitely offers the tools for that, no matter if the changes are done in-house or externally. You start basically with the assessment tool. The assessment tool helps you to identify all the issues that you have and points it to the exact point in your list of codes where you need to change it and what you need to change. So it's very much hands-on. This way, you can also track the progress of development, which is quite important for reporting, right? So you get a dashboard on your hand as well that shows you, okay, so what is the current status when you start with all these changes and how is it progressing? It will also help you to prioritize certain issues from core and key issues to minor issues. So you can work on the essential problems first, and before you start with the minor issues that you then change later. On top, of course, there is the plugin. The plugin assistant. I always like to call it the quick win, because it's very quickly to install. It's just 2 lines of code. And basically within 1 hour, your pages will feature this plugin assistant, no matter if you have done the changes already or not. It's already a very positive message into the market. It already helps a lot of people to adjust to a big extent. It doesn't take the work off your shoulder to go through the audit and do the changes on the back end. But this is a quick message that you can already send now and say, this is what we're going to do. And by 2025, we will be completely fit. But you already know you can do something. So that's the basic setup that you need to consider. From our side, we are very happy to support any organization who wants to learn more about it, help them with their transition as well. So we also offer support and consulting. And maybe important as well, all the major languages are available, and any further language can be easily also adjusted. Even if you have multilingual pages, so or a user comes from the outside with a different language in their bag, they can switch the tool to the language that they need and basically do the changes in their mother tongue.
Thank you so much, Mike. I'm so glad that we are recording this episode in 2023 and that there is still a little bit of space until 2025. Thank you for being very informative and being my guest in the podcast today.
If I may add, we even have a special offer running at the moment. So if someone wants to do something good before 2024, I'm happy to answer the question, what's the special offer, and to pass it on for everyone.
Fingers crossed. Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, so I hope that this episode, this conversation was interesting for you. When we talk about inclusive workplaces, we focus a lot on the mindset. We focus a lot on inclusive leadership. We also talk about inclusive policies. But today we talked about some really technical levels of being accessible, of being inclusive. By the way, if you like to know about the Web Accessibility Directive, you can use this as a keyword, or you can search for the European Accessibility Act 2025. These might be some keywords that might be interesting for you if you like to know more. I would be so grateful if you recommend and share this episode to a colleague or to a friend. I also have a lot of content that relates to diversity and inclusion in general, also when it comes to some technical, let's say practical solutions. For example, this episode on being a part-time manager, which absolutely is the future of work, and the conversation with Johanna Fink, where you can learn about various flexible approaches to working, and you will find it at astepahead.pro/005. Or if you like, you can listen to an episode of a technological shame of Generation Z, the youngest generation in our job market. Today we talked a little bit about the oldest generation, but also the youngest generation can face some technical issues, some technical challenges, and this phenomenon has even got its own name, technological shame, tech shame. So if you're interested in my conversation with Marta Leszczyńska, you can find it at astepahead.pro/013. By the way, all the links from this episode today are at the same portal, the same address, /014, the number 14 episode of my A Step Ahead podcast. Well, I hope that you enjoyed, and I'm looking forward to being with you again. Let's stay in touch. Goodbye.